So welcome to Monday. Believe it or not, we are 3 weeks away from graduation. So graduation will be Thursday, October 3rd. We did just post the link. We will have an email going out with an email link. I will also post the link in the chat in Slack. Give me 1 second to grab it. October. Oh, that's nice. Meetup doesn't sort these in order. There we go. Ooh, that is an ugly link. Let me shorten that. So if you guys can RSVP on the meetup link that I just put in Slack, that would be good. You are welcome to invite friends and family. If you know any employers that you could get to come, they are also very much welcome. The general schedule is down in the description. So we're going to ask you guys to get there at 5:30. That gives you 30 minutes to get set up. We will have a table set up for each one of you. I cannot promise you that there will be power at every table. So do make sure that your laptop is fully charged so that you can demo it. 5:30 to 6 o'clock will be for you guys to set up. If friends and family get there a little earlier, that is okay. We will kick off right at 6 p.m. So 6 p.m., I'll ask everyone to kind of come down, sit in the center of the room. I will give a little bit of an introduction. I will explain what you guys have been learning and what a tech stack is. And then I will play your intro videos. So your intro videos will be 30 seconds to a minute. And the idea is for you to introduce yourself, say your name. I will have a table number assigned to you guys. So it will go 1 through however many graduates we have between 10 and 15 around the room. I will probably do it just alphabetically by last name, just so it's easier to get everyone arranged. But I will have a table number for you guys. Once you get that, you can record your intro video at any time. You can do that in QuickTime Player or in Zoom, whichever you prefer. Again, 30 seconds to a minute. Hi, my name is blah, blah, blah. This is the idea for my capstone. This is why you should come talk to me. That's pretty much all you need, right? So just a quick little blurb that will play those videos. That will take us up to 6:15. Then we will have 45 minutes for people to kind of come to you and network. So we will have a little table sign basically that has your name on it. I'm going to have you guys fill out a form with either your LinkedIn URL or your portfolio URL, basically wherever you would like to send people if they would like to get in touch with you. We will also have your email on that if you would like. You will kind of demo for 45 minutes. People come up to you, ask questions, kind of see how all of that is working. Then at 7 o'clock, we will call everyone up. We will have all of your certificates, your graduation certificates on a table. You'll grab yours, stay by the front of the room. We will get a group photo for you, trying to be as efficient as possible here. And then afterwards, you guys are welcome to network and mingle and kind of use the space, talk to people, celebrate. With all of that said, unfortunately, we do not have funding for you guys to keep your laptops and monitors this cohort. So that means that after we get the group photo, I will need everyone to turn in their hardware. With that said, and I know that this is expensive and we're not expecting anyone to do this, but if you would like to keep the laptop, it is $750, and then it is $80 if you would like to keep the monitor. Unfortunately, that needs to be a check paid out to Hack Upstate by graduation. Unfortunately, we don't have the funding to do like monthly payment plans and all of that kind of stuff. So if you would like to keep your hardware, that option is on the table. And the reason why we picked 750 is that's roughly what you would pay if you just like went on eBay and bought this laptop. Most of the laptops this cohort we did buy brand new. So you guys are the first users of it. I believe they go for $1,100 new. They may be $999. But that is that those are the options on the table. Joe, one check is fine if you're buying both the monitor and the laptop. One check's fine. Okay. Any questions on graduation? I will get you a form to fill out with details on how to record your 30-second to minute long video, what table number you will be, all of that kind of stuff. Those will be details coming headed your way this week. Any other questions? Okay. So what's coming up? This week is our final review week. So this is your chance to go, dear God, I've been in this program for 22 weeks. I have learned a ton of new information. Here's what I have questions about. So ideally, that is going to come in the form of concepts, terms, things that you have heard me say, things that Nathan or Ryan has introduced you to, something that you've heard in the industry and you've noticed our curriculum doesn't cover it, anything like that. We are going to start class with those kinds of questions. We will then move class into capstone questions. So anything that you're struggling on with your capstone, it will kind of be like a mini open office hours. But the goal there is oftentimes if you are struggling with something, chances are another student will also be struggling with that same concept in their capstone. So all week this week, we will run class by opening any questions up for concepts or terms or things that we haven't covered in the curriculum yet. Second half will be capstone questions. And then the third, not the third half, the third part, we have two options. There is a couple of slides left on that how to adult deck that I have. So I'd like to go through that at some point. And I also have a library project. So that is a project that is a good final run through of basic full stack concepts, making sure that we have complete understanding of project setup, of how the database is working, of how we get routing set up, of how we make individual reusable components that have data loading from the database, all of that good stuff. So the library project and the how to adult are my my I don't want to say my fillers, but what we will get to this week. However, the biggest priority is concepts and capstone questions. So I am going to pause there and see if anyone has questions. Or any questions about what Nathan covered last week in DevOps or questions about that flow. Okay, doke. Think about questions as they pop up. I will be starting every class with that. So just know feel free to review kind of any homework assignments we've done, review the schedule, think about the projects that we've covered. We want you guys to squeeze as much as possible out of this course. So I'm going to start a poll. I am going to encourage one of the first two options here. Um, either we can go through the how to adult, or we can go over the entire library project again, starting from scratch, full stack concepts, all of that kind of stuff. However, if you guys really want a capstone workday, I will not stop you from voting on that. I'm going to discourage that because I do want to get through those other two, but it is up to you guys to decide.
This is for today.
This is for today. And whatever we don't do today, we will probably get to tomorrow. One more person to vote in. Going once. Going twice. Sold to the library project. Okay, let's go ahead and dive in on that. I will say that if you are feeling really behind on your capstone, you can drop out of here. The attendance word for tonight will be library. So if you are really feeling like you want to go work on your capstone, you are welcome to drop out of here. But this will be the last project that we do in class together, and hopefully will be a pretty good review of everything. What's coming up down the pipeline: review week this week, library project, how to adult, capstone questions, and general concept questions. Next week is the career week. That will be virtual, just like always. And then our final week, that first week in October, we will be in person at Common Space. So you are encouraged to show up in person. If we get enough people, I will actually order pizza for everyone. But you guys are encouraged to be in person to work on your capstone questions, get final things over the finish line, get a chance to record your videos, all of that stuff. So review week, career week, final capstone project week, and then the end of that week is graduation. Okay, with all of that said, let's get oh, I did the OS update. Okay. Let's go ahead and dive in. My screen share is working, isn't it? Cool. So I am going to head to my code. I am going to create my week 22. Is that correct? Double check on the schedule. Yes, week 22. I will create my day one. I will create my library backend. I will pop that open in VS Code. In my integrated terminal, I am going to npm init-y. I'm going to npm install express, cores, equalize, and pg. Then I'm going to open up the terminal, cd to my day one folder by dragging and dropping that file path in. And then I am going to npx create React app called library. Out of here, VS Code front end. And I will grab that folder, throw that in VS Code as well. Open in integrated terminal. I am going to npm start npm install React router DOM, because I know I will be working with multiple pages here, and then npm start that sucker up. everyone a second, and then we will dive into our backend setup. Okay, backend. We are going to go into our package.json. We're going to add our start script. We are going to add in our type module, and that's what is going to allow us to use the import statements instead of the require statements. And finally, we are going to make a new file called index.js and get a couple things imported. Express from express, cores from cores. Oops. We get our server set up by using express. We get our server to use cores. We get our server to use express.json. So that way we can send and receive JSON data in from the front end. We are going to, this is supposed to be a new backend file, not the one from week 20. Correct. We didn't start the library project, did we? I don't think we did in week 20.
Day 4.
We did.
We did?
Yeah. The first part.
I thought we were just gonna go through it again because it's been a week.
Wow. Okay. Well, I guess
I don't think we finished it. I think we got a lot of stuff set up, and I think we got as far as
We put books in
seed. Yeah, we got seed data. We didn't set up. I don't think we got any of the other stuff set up in the front end.
see, I miss you guys for a week and my memory just disappears. Okay. Well, let me pause. Does anyone want to finish going through this setup, or do we want to just jump back over to that one?
Yeah, let's finish.
Okay.
I like to see it.
So we will reuse that book seed, but because we're almost finished on the backend setup, it just makes sense to finish that. I will borrow the db.js and the book seed from it, but let's just finish this out with a server.get a recres and a server res.send server running. Server.listen on 3000. I'm going to put this up to 3002 just in case you have something running like your capstone in the background. Doesn't really matter what port you pick as long as it's not already being used by something else. And a console log server running on 3002. Okay, I'm going to pause there. Any Joe, there's no like easy thing that I know of that's built into Express to let you say like pick the next available port. But I'm sure that you could write a script to basically say check to see if anything's on 3000. If it isn't, use that. Check to see if anything's on 3001 and keep on incrementing up. I've never personally done that, but I know that React does that, right? When it fires up, it goes, hey, something's already on this. Do you want us to use the next available one? So I'm sure it is theoretically possible, or I know it is possible. I just haven't written it. Let me see how far we got in the front end. Okay, yeah, we are going to capitalize on the front end. What do we do in back end?
Oh yeah, maybe
Okay.
we only got the
I think we got the
a
seeds
list
in
item. Yeah.
and it listing out. Okay. So hopefully this is a good review. Totally meant to do that intentionally of setting things up. I am going to go borrow things from that backend though. but I'm going to move them over kind of one by one so that we can review them as we do move them over. So I'm going to pop that open in our existing or in a new window. I'm going to create my DB folder, and then I'm going to create the files inside the DB folder, which is bookc.json, and db.js. Then I'm going to move my book model over. So a reminder of what's going on in the book model. What we are doing is telling Sequelize, hey, this is what the table will look like in the Postgres database, right? We are modeling for Sequelize what the end result would look like. So if you think about a train model, or if you think about any kind of model, right, it's always a smaller representation of the bigger thing that's out there. So think about the model just like that. We are modeling for Sequelize what the actual thing will look like. ID, obviously the most important one. Primary key, we tell it auto increment, basically take the last one, take the last row number and add one to it. And then the two different kinds of the two different columns that we're keeping track of here. Book seed, I'm also going to go borrow all of that. Reminder that ChatGPT is a good way to seed your data, come up with a couple lines of data, or tell it how you want it to be structured, copy and paste that sucker over. Great way to get your database up and running. Finally, db.js is a little tricky. But we are going to bring all of the models in. We're going to bring all of our seed data in. We're going to tell it to connect to the database. And now that you have seen with Nathan, you may need to get a little fancy here with an if statement with process.env, those environment variables, to say, hey, if it's on the local computer, connect to localhost. Otherwise, go out to Fly or go out to some other server and connect to it there. We pull the model in to get access to the actual books in the database. We're going to get to checked out books in a second. We connect to the DB. This is mostly boilerplate code, but for the most part, should be a quick way to connect in, see if there are any books in the database, and if there aren't, go ahead and seed that in, and then finally export it out so that we can use it in the rest of our files. So in index.js, I'm going to finish off what we had going on in our existing backend. I'm going to import the books, and I'm also going to move over my server.getBooks endpoint. And that should take care of everything on the backend for us. Pausing there for any backend questions whatsoever before we go over to the front end.
Yeah, so that first server.get, that dashes the home page, right?
Yep. That
So-
is what will show up once we start the server. If we go to localhost, if I can have my window in the right spot, localhost 3002, that's where we get the server running, because really it's a slash at the end without anything there. So this slash is what lines up with this slash right here.
Okay. So for example, if I was to put like a React component there, that would pop up on the page. Like in between the brackets that says server and running, but you put
Not
like
a React component, because React has to be npm installed and have its own React server and all of that stuff. You could say like test here and throw test here, and that would still work. Or you could throw something like
can you put an object in there?
yeah, you could say so
Cool.
whatever we send back in here is what's coming out. And you could even do something like this and send back same exact thing, just doing it as a variable and then including that data there. Or you could even say like cat 1 + 1 and get 2 out here.
Cool. Thanks.
Any other questions? Backend is up and running. Let's go ahead and steal what we had in the front end, which was not too much. In our app.js, I think we cleared out the header. Our app.css, we deleted all the crap that's in there. What else did we do in our front end? Looks like I did not grab Bootstrap, so everything we did was in app.js. So I'm going to borrow that. Oh, looks like we didn't even set up the router. Okay, so let's take a step back here and think about what we want our library app to do. I think it would be good to be able to, let's say that there isn't a librarian, right? So let's say that our library app is like for a home library. So I want the ability to get a list of all of my books on the homepage. I want the ability to search for my books and find a specific book. And then maybe I want to start it as maybe I have multiple readers in my house, right? So we should keep track of who the different readers are, allow them to check out books, and allow them to return books. And I think that that's a good app, shows all the functionality. We get some relational data in there. We can do search, which is something we haven't done in the database before. Any other ideas, any other requests to add to the app before we get all of that stuff working?
Adding a new book to the library.
Sure, we can do that. Okay. If we get to images, Joe, I'm happy to throw in some kind of like grid UI for like showing the books and go from there, because that's not a bad idea. Okay. We can go ahead. Let me think about how I want to do this. We could get away with this all on a single page app, but I feel like re-reviewing how routing works is probably a good idea. Yeah, okay. I'm going to add in here my router before we move anything over from week 20, day 4. So first thing we do is before the return, we say the my routes is going to equal this thing called create browser router, and make sure that it does import that from React Router DOM. Reminder that we always need a router if we have a multi-page React app. So it is possible to make a full React project without a router, but if we want multiple pages, we do have to set that up. Then we are going to set our path, which will be an empty slash. That will be for our home page. And then we need to create that element. Well, that element is going to be a component. So we got to go create that first. So I'm going to do a new file called home.js. I'm going to say const home. It's going to start out by returning div ID home. And we'll just throw an h1 that says home on that. And you know what? I think I want to do a nav bar. Maybe we'll do a nav bar with a link to the home and then a link to like checked out books for 2 different pages and see how that works. Okay. In my home, make sure you export your default home. And then in app.js, we can make the element home as well. Once we set up our first route, we do have to come in here and say, hey, the router provider, which is basically the component that also comes from React Router, is going to have the router of my routes. While we are here, let's do 2 more components. I'm going to do a navbar.js. And I will also do a checked out books.js. And in my app.js, I will throw in another path for checked out books and an element of checked out books. Okay. We are going to do something fancy with the nav bar. But let's save here, make sure that you've got your home page showing up. If you have any questions or errors, anything like that, welcome to ask now. Realize that's a lot of new code across different files.
Mine is saying you can't resolve /home. It's from the import.
Make sure do you have an export default home?
What? Oh, my home's gone. Okay, never mind. That's the problem. I don't know
That
what
would
happened.
definitely do it. Okay. Anyone need another minute? We good? So in the past, what we can do is if we want our nav bar on every page, we could just throw the nav bar right in here. We could import it on all those pages. We could make them show up. But sometimes you get into a weird scenario where you're like, oh, I want the nav bar to be all part of a container fluid, but I want my main page content to be in a container. Or, oh, I don't want to have to import my nav bar on every single page. So there's a way that you can use something called an outlet in React Router DOM. And basically what you can do is set up a layout file that will make something show up. And then you can make the subcomponent show up inside of that. That may not make any sense right now, but I'm going to set it up and then see if it clicks for you then. So I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to call layout.js. And layout is going to start like any other component. We will return a container. Now we don't have Bootstrap installed yet, so that container is not going to do much. But for getting started, it'll be fine. We'll say H1, I'll say Max's library. And then I want my nav bar to show up right underneath Max's library. And finally, I want this thing called outlet. You will notice outlet came in an import via React Router DOM, which is kind of interesting. Then we still need to export our default. Oops, cannot type tonight. Export our default layout. Or spell, apparently. Once we get that layout done, throw it down here in the bottom, we can change up our routes a little bit. So back in my app.js, I'm going to nest all of these together. So what I'm going to say is, hey, the path is still going to be an empty slash. The element that should show up is my layout element. And then the children of that element are going to be all of these down here. So this is what the final version should look like. And what we're basically doing is saying, hey, anytime that you have a path that looks like this, take whatever the child is that matches on the path and shove it into the layout where the outlet should show up. So take this element or this element based off of this path and then show the layout where the element from here is getting dropped into the outlet from here. What that allows us to do is keep on adding additional paths and components right here. And you'll notice in the browser, I still get Max's library and navbar goes here, but I don't need to put that on the home page or any new page that I create because that outlet is taking care of all of that work for me.
That's
While I'm here-
only
Oh, go ahead.
that's only if you want the nav bar to show up everywhere, right?
Correct. You can set up additional layout pages though. So you could come in here and say, don't follow me on this, just an example. You could set up another one here that said path no nav. And then you could say element is going to be layout 2. Let me create that first. And this is a good example just to see the power of a layout. And the reason why this is helpful is because sometimes you may have a different layout for a signed in user than a signed out user. And so being able to control multiple layouts, like, oh, signed in users have this nav bar on the side, but signed out users don't, that can be a really helpful thing. And then you could throw your children in here and say, the path of my slash is still going to be an element with the homepage. So in this situation, when I'm on my basic localhost, it's matching on this layout. So I still see my navbar goes here. And it's taking me to the home page. But if I go to no nav, you'll see I get rid of that nav bar because in my layout 2, I just have this and the outlet. So layout 2 could be used, and you can name it whatever, but that could be used for authenticated user or something like that. Any other question?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to understand the outlet.
Mhm.
So in the layout.js, the outlet is it's like connected to the checkout books.
Yeah, so think about it as the router, right, is going to look at the path. And if the path is checked out books, it's going to take this component and shove it in right where this outlet is here.
And then you can use that that same syntax outlet if you add another path like you just did with the no nav.
Yes.
Okay, I was trying to understand like why you don't just write checked out books right there instead of outlet, but and it gives you like a little template, basically a layout. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, so that you can create layout once and not have to create it a bunch of times based off of all the routes. Right? So you're saying, hey, the signed in user is going to get this layout, and here are all the pages that signed in user can access, compared to logged out user isn't going to have a sidebar, isn't going to have any of that, but they can access the sign in page and the home page and maybe one other thing.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay. Let's dive in. Now that I've got my outlet working, we should probably throw something on the nav bar. So let's just do an A tag with an href to / and that will be to our home. Oh, we shouldn't be using A tags, should we? Should be using link tags to home. And I'm going to take my no nav out and I get my little home there. And then maybe I'll do a vertical bar and another link to checked out books. Checked out books. Get my little link there. If I click on that, it takes me over to checked out books. There is a cool thing we can do with the active link too. React router active link. See if I can remember how to do this. So what we can do is in our nav bar, instead of using link, we can actually use this thing called nav link. And then what we can do is in our app.css, we can target our nav. And if the link is active, we can set the font weight to bold. And make sure that your nav links are properly named. Okay, so now if we're on the home page, you see home is bold here. And if we switch over to checked out books, it makes checked out books bold. That's just a quick little styling thing that we can do to know like exactly what page we're on. And you can do all kinds of things in here. It's just CSS, so you can get crazy and set color or underline or border or anything like that. But that's just a quick little way to know what page you're on. Okay. Let's get our homepage showing all of our available books. So we did do this mostly in the front end that we already built out. So I'm going to reuse that, but I am going to go over each of the steps as we do it. We set up state. Why do we need state in React? Whenever we have data that is either coming from a backend or the user is interacting with, we always want to put that data in state. The reason we do that is because whenever that data updates, whether it's the user typing in something in a form field or because the API has loaded in data, whenever we set the state or update the state, we don't need to manually re-render the API, reuse our inner HTML. All we need to do is set that data into state, and React will literally react to that update and re-show the data that we need. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that over into my homepage. I also am going to come over here and I'm going to borrow my use effect. Why do we need the use effect? Because we only want this to happen when the page first loads. We don't want this data loading every time the state gets updated. So by putting it in the use effect and this empty parameter of the empty array down at the bottom, we are able to say only do this when the page first loads. This 3001 books, we actually need to change to 3002 because we have updated our backend to run on 3002. books is going to align with our books in the back end right here. So this fetch is what is generating the request. This res is what the response gets sent back as, and it's going to the book. The book is coming from the database. The database is using the model in order to communicate with the books in our database. So we find them all and we send them back through the books in the JSON. We take that JSON and parse it out, and finally take those books from the data and set them into state. Pausing there for any questions. No stupid questions at this point. This is really, really important that you get this. Terry?
Yeah, I like missed a few like stuff because I'm in comment space. So what did I miss?
So you missed me forgetting that on week 20, day 4, we set all of this up. And so I basically have been reviewing everything up until that point. The only new thing that we did that we haven't done in week 20, day 4, is I covered this layout, which is basically a way to put a nav bar on every page without having to import nav bar on every single page. So basically what happens is we wrap the individual pages in this children here, and then in the layout, whatever child that matches here will basically get dropped into this thing called outlet here. So what we're able to do is say, hey, this H1 will be on every page, this nav bar will be on every page, and then based off of whatever path matches here or here, take this element and drop it into the outlet here. Now, the one last thing I will say on the app.js is you're like, okay, that's cool. I get the layout, but if I want my nav bar on every page, why don't I just throw my nav bar right here, Mr. Smarty Pants? And then I don't need to worry about the layout or the outlet or any of that crap. Well, I need to fix 2 things in here first. I need to import a use state and my use effect. Now, look at what happens if we try and load our page here. The problem that it runs into is this nav link is coming from React Router. You're like, okay, well, what's the big deal about that? Well, we now used our nav bar, but we're using it outside of our router. So the problem is link and navlink and all of the good navigation stuff that comes from React, from the router, won't work properly because we just took our nav bar and tried to use links outside of the router. And that confuses the crap out of the router. So that's another reason why we want to use those layout files, is because when we use the layout here, it is literally inside of the router, so that when we use something like navlink, navlink has the context and knows how to work inside the router. So that's why we can't just throw a nav bar outside of the router and use it. So the layout is a solution, is a workaround for that.
So
Okay.
so
Yeah.
why do you have 2 separate like layout? Is it one just for home and one for like the other pages?
Yeah, this is just an example of like how you can have 2 separate layouts. A very common use for this would be you would have one layout for all the authenticated users. So basically saying, hey, if you were logged in, here's the layout to use that may have a different nav bar or a sidebar or something that shows up. And then here are all of the routes that show up inside of that layout, compared to layout 2 or no nav, where you could say, hey, this is for all of the signed out users, where you would have the login page and the home page and stuff like that. So we
And
won't actually be using this, just an example that you can have 2 separate layouts.
and can you place like I guess one I don't know how to say it. Is there a limit of how many paths you could put in on a layout inside of? Okay.
And you can use sub layouts too. If you wanted to get really fancy, you can use a layout in a layout. But no limit to the number of paths you can use. Our app at work probably has 150 routes at this point. So you can add a lot in. No limitation. Any other questions? Okay. All right, we got our homepage. Let's finish that out. We got our data into state. The last thing we need to move over from the code we already wrote is mapping over our data. So order this works. Oh, and we need one more. The if there isn't books show the loading screen. So the way that this loads in the browser is it starts at app. App comes in and it goes, all right, you want your layout to show up. Your layout is going to show this H1 in this nav bar. The nav bar is going to go pull all of this content in, and it's going to say, okay, well, what page are we on? Well, for that, we got to go back up to app, and we go, all right, we're not on checked out books URL. We're on just the home page. So go to the home page and take whatever is returned from here and shove it into the outlet right here. Once we do that, we go back to the home page, and the home page goes, okay, I'm going to keep track of books in state. Don't know what's in there yet, just know that it's set up. Now I'm going to skip over this use effect because the component has not mounted or rendered for the first time. Then it goes, well, there aren't any books yet loaded in, so show the loading screen. Then this use effect goes, okay, something just showed up. Now I got to go make this API call. The API call goes to books. Books goes over to our backend, grabs the books from the database, and in the response, sends them back to the front end. The front end parses that JSON, gets the data, is looking at the books, which lines up from the books here, and sets the books into state. Now our books are updated here. So we take our updated books, we ignore this if statement because now there are books that are loaded in, and it comes down. We don't need this H1 anymore because that's in our, oh no, we do. I do want that there. Then it comes down and it goes books. Books is updated. Go map over them. What does map do? It's a loop that gets us access to each individual book. What would we like to show up? We would like an LI to show up that uses the book ID from the database and shows the book title and author. All of that is going to show up in a list item, so meaning a bullet point, and that is what gets all of our books to show up here. That is the basic data flow. Does anyone have questions? Okay. Let's add a new book to work, and then we can do check out book by user. Okay. I'm going to do add a new book on a new page. I feel like that's a little bit more complicated of a data flow, so I think we'll do that. So I'm going to add a new page. New component, we'll call it add new book.js. We can go to our app.js and we will add a new path or add new book, an element of add new book. In our home.js, we can add a link to add new book. Terry.
I noticed with like layout, you have like children in it. Is it necessary to have like the children word inside of the layout?
Children?
With like the path.
Oh, yes, that is a requirement of React Router. So it is basically saying, hey, inside that outlet, what would you like to show up? And it is going to take whatever child that matches here and make that show up in the layout. So that's the reason why when we click on add new book, we still get Max's library and checked out books. Actually, you know what? It's probably a better idea to take that add new book, take that link and put it in our nav bar instead. That would make more sense. So if we make that a nav link and save that and throw a space in at the end, now we can go back to our home page, we can go to our checked out books, or we can go to our add new book. Okay. Any other questions?
Not at the moment, but I feel like I do have a question later on.
All right, when it bubbles up, let me know. We're going to throw a form in here. We'll do our input type text. We can throw a label in here that says title. And we'll throw an ID of title on here. And for HTML accessibility compliance, we will add the HTML4 in. And we will do another label, HTML for author. And input type text ID author. Now, two different ways of going about this. This right now is an uncontrolled input, meaning HTML, the browser, is controlling the input. A controlled input means we link it up to state. I'm going to show you how to do it both ways. I'm going to leave the title of the book uncontrolled, and I'm going to leave the author controlled. So you can see how we use state and how it is possible to do a form without state. Why do we want to do it in state? Well, if you wanted the ability to clear the text field after the form had been submitted, like if you set up like a save and add another, or if you wanted to add some validation message or something like that, it would be a good idea to put it into state. But it is entirely possible to not use state. It is entirely possible to only use the form submission data. So two different ways of doing it. I will show you both of them. Either way, though, we do need a button with a type of submit. And I always, it's a pet peeve of mine to see a button that is labeled submit. I always want to know what clicking on the button will do. So be descriptive in your buttons. Don't just say, you know, submit or save. If you add that in, you can always say like save book or something like that, add new book. Okay, so in here, we're going to add our on submit. And we will go to add book. We'll say const add book. It's going to get to the event. The event needs the default prevented so it doesn't refresh the page. We want to control it in React. And then there's two ways of accessing the data. The first way, we're going to say title and set title is a uState, starts out as an empty string. On the input, we're going to add a value of the title and a on change, grab the event and set the title to the event target value. If you ever are setting up a controlled input and cannot type in it, if you go into title and it doesn't let you type, it is probably something wrong with your value or your on change. It's a very common thing to do. The other way that we can access the data is right in our form submission. We can say const author is equal to the event target elements author value, and console log out the author, and hopefully do our title and our author. And hit add new book, and we can see our data comes out there. So two different ways of doing this. One is grabbing our on change, and anytime a letter gets typed in, we take the event target value, set it into React state, then can take that title and update it in state and access that data directly here. The other way of doing it is making sure that there is an ID on your input and saying when that form is submitted, go to the event of the form submission, go to the target, which is actually going to go to the form, go to the elements, which is going to be all of the elements in here, use author, which lines up with the ID here, and then grab the value right here. Two different ways of doing it, both work perfectly fine. All of the React tutorials I've ever gone through get all hot and heavy about using state because they want to show you the power of state. But this is even though it's a more verbose way, can be a much simpler way of accessing the data because we don't need to add the value and the on change. Now, the one benefit of React is that we could do something in here to say, set the title to something new. And when we submit the form, it will automatically update that to something new. What we can't do, or what we shouldn't do, is something like this. That will technically work. That will clear out the author, but by going into the event target elements, we're using the browser's native DOM, right? The native document object model. And so while this still does work in React, this would be discouraged because we're circumventing React's virtual DOM, the very efficient way of going through and updating data through state or through what React is keeping track of. So this would be discouraged. This would be much more preferred. So if you do need to accomplish something like clearing out a form, it is better to have your data in state. So two different ways of accomplishing it. So I'm going to comment all of those out, but group them together. Any questions on any of that? Okay. Now that we've got our title and our author, we need to go do the backend work. So I am going to make my add book async. I'm going to await my fetch to my localhost 3002. I will send it to book and tell it the method is post. Actually, it should be a put, shouldn't it? No, it's a post. Puts for updating data. We are going to say the headers are a content type of application JSON, and throw that in quotes because JavaScript strings as keys don't like dashes unless they're quoted. And finally, the body is going to be a JSON stringify of our title and our author. Then we are going to come over to our backend and we're going to say, hey, you're going to get a server post to an individual book. That's going to be an async rec res. That is going to await our book dot create, and it's going to save in the request body, and then it is going to res dot send. It doesn't really matter what we send back. We just want to send something back that we have created that in the database. Go ahead and save that. Make sure I have no errors in the back end. And then the last thing we need to do is when we create that, we need to navigate them back to the home page. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a hook up here. So I'm going to say const navigate to, or navigate to equals use navigate. You'll notice that comes in from the router here. And finally, we can use navigate back to the home page. I broke something. What did I break? Navigate to use navigate. React hook, use navigate is called in a function add book. So it's either
Shouldn't you
React.
be using navigate to parentheses?
Oh, thank you. It's exactly what I did wrong. Thank you. Okay, so we fill out our form. Half the data is in state, half of it's in a regular form. If you're going to use one or the other, stick to one type. I didn't do that here, but controlled inputs, uncontrolled inputs. Then when the form is submitted, prevent the browser from doing the stupid refresh thing, pull out the data from the uncontrolled inputs, do a fetch to the backend. That will be a post. Set our data as application JSON, and then go ahead and send in the data, whether it is an uncontrolled or controlled input. It's either coming from state or it's coming from the elements in the form. Then we come over here, we line the post up with the post over here. We line book up with book right here. And we say, hey, take all of the data that's in the request body, go ahead and create that in the database and just send something back that saying we have created it. Once that comes back over here, because we have awaited it, that data will be in the database, and then we will navigate them to the home page. If all of this is working, we can come over here and say, fill that out. Go ahead and add our new book, and we can see that it got added not only to our list, but if we pop open Beekeeper, and connect to the right database, you can see I got added to the database. Okay, I know I'm going kind of fast here. Welcome to save, slow down, or this is a good speed, or ask questions. Tell me to take a break, whatever.
So I've been trying to catch up, actually. I'm getting a failed fetch.
Okay. Check your database, your backend terminal. You have any errors there? Here, go ahead and share your screen.
Yeah, it says Prettier's mad at me, but I can't see where.
Oh, did you put some makeup on? All right. If we click on Prettier,
I don't think I'm running. I don't think it's running. That might
that's
be it.
fine. I want to. Okay. Here. Oh, Prettier. I think Prettier does get mad at this. Let me just make sure mine looks the same way.
It should. I've been trying to like follow along and copy and like copy and paste.
Yeah,
Right.
so let me get out of, got in prettier. I don't know how to get out of it. Not helping. Okay, let me just reopen terminal. And go back to this one and npm start. Maybe your failed to fetch
think
is
that
just
was it.
that it wasn't running. You want to refresh the browser and see if it fixes it?
Okay, yep. Now it's in there.
Well, that was
Um,
easy.
Just make sure this works.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Nice work.
Noted.
It's a good review for everyone. Feeling like we're getting comfortable with this, hopefully.
Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah.
It might be a bit unclear, but in your code on the add a new book.js line 16 to 22. So I
Yeah.
remember a blog project. I'm not sure if it was a put instead of a post, but we did something that made us like not have to need the body colon JSON.stringify or like the content type in the headers.
Yeah, so that is really good question. What we did is we changed it to use form data instead of using JSON stringify. So when you use form data, it lines up with the uh, form data handles like file uploads a little bit better, which is why we switched over to that. So when like the first revision that we did of the blog project, we did application JSON. But in the second one, we changed it back to the native form data so that we could handle file uploads better.
Okay. Thank you.
Joe.
In home.js,
Yes.
that books.map, and then book, is the word, the variable book, is that coming from the back end, or did you just make that for the front end specifically?
Made it up as long as you're
Okay.
consistent. So now this books lines up with state, and then this books is what has to line up with the back end. So this books has to match this books right here.
Gotcha.
But once that lines up, this can be called anything, this can be called anything, and this can be called anything. So you could do each book here. And that would work without any problems.
Gotcha.
Naming convention is singular, plural, but you know, whatever works, whatever floats your boat. Any other questions? Now, Nathan showed you guys how to do an abstraction where you can basically set the backend URL based off of a variable. I'm going to show you guys how to do that, but even one step further by making a API call wrapper that is so much easier. And I do it at the beginning of every full stack project that I work on. So we'll do that and then we'll go on break. So I like to make a new file. If you're going to have a lot of these files, you can create a lib folder and put them in lib. I've also seen it called helpers folder or util, UTIL. But because this is just one file, I'm just going to, so I call mine make API call.js. And I'll call it const make API call. And it's going to take three variables. It's going to take the path. It's going to take the method, and it's going to take the body. And we'll export default make API call. And then here's what I do. I'm going to go borrow this entire in my, I'm going to go in my add a new book. I'm going to go borrow my fetch here. And go back to my make API call. And throw that in there. This has to be async. And then what I can do is just put in the path at the end of my URL. I can make my method line up with my method up here. And I can take my body and throw my body in right into my stringify. Then if I need to update any of my API calls, I can just come in here and edit the URL directly. What this allows us to do is way simplify down our fetch. Oh, and what we can do is we can say, get the res, then get the data from awaiting the res.json, and then return the data. So what does that look like in practice? Well, instead of having to do this stuff, all I need to do is say await my make API call to book, which will be a post, and it will also have this data. And because we abstracted all of that away, what we should be able to do is add a new book. And add new book. It still works, but because we did all of the work of moving this into its own file, look at how much easier it is to understand what make API call is doing. All it's doing is taking the path, the method, and the data, and then using that in an abstracted out function to make it much easier to work with it.
And so if you want to make multiple API calls to different endpoints, you just make another file.
You don't even need to make another file because the path is dynamic here.
Oh,
So you could just change the name of the path right here and it would still work.
I mean, like the local host part, like if we wanted to do what Nathan taught us how to ask it to like check to see if you want.
Yeah, you can still do that right in here. You can say like, if there's a process.env local that equals true, or let's say prod, then go to my url.com. Otherwise, go to localhost 3002. And then right here, we can use the URL.
So like, even if will there ever be an event where there's two different URLs?
Yeah, not well, yeah, there is. There could be times that you are using like someone else's API, at which point your solution of either having a second file can make sense, or you can make it so the path here doesn't have a URL built in, and every time you put the full URL out. But the vast majority of times you're either going to be, if you're building a full stack app, you're going to be working with your own API primarily. And so things like you're going to have control of the JSON, but obviously it's super annoying every single time to put content type and stringify and all of that stuff. So this is basically they call it you're basically building your own library or utility function or helper function. They all kind of mean the same thing, to make this just easier to access data in the API.
Okay. And I have another quick question about the lib folder. So let's say you put all of your components into the lib folder, lib folder, do you have to go and edit those paths in your import?
VS Code is supposed to give you the option. So if you move it into the lib folder, VS Code should say, do you want me to auto update your imports to use that new path? So yes, you do, but VS Code is supposed to do it for you. It doesn't work as well as I would like. WebStorm is the text editor I use that does it a lot better. But yes, excuse me, if you move a file, you do have to update all the imports.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. This may not be the exact way that he taught it. Like he may have used an if statement instead of a ternary, but hopefully that's close enough that you get the idea. And this is a very common thing to do. That isn't just like, oh, Nathan taught us this cool, fun trick. That's a very commonly used thing in the industry, as is abstracting out the make API call or whatever you want to call it. Some people call it like my API or fetch without stupid verbose shit. Whatever you want to name your function is fine with me. All right, anyone not get this working? Okay. This seems like a good breakpoint. When we come back, we will get the checked out table working, and we will talk about relational data and users and all of that kind of stuff. Got to create a users table as well. So go do attendance if you haven't already. The attendance word tonight is library, and then go on break and be back at 7:25, and we will keep working on this. And brainstorm any functions that you may want to see that you think would be helpful for your capstone. Happy to add them in here. All right. See you at 7:25. Oh, Joe, I just saw your note. And Austin, I will also take a look at that. Oh yeah, that's because process isn't accessible on the front end. How did Nathan do it? Was there an import?
I don't know if he used. I think he used a. He just threw everything in
A
a
.env file?
.env file.
Yeah, but you should still be able to. Oh, I don't have a process. Oh yeah, I do.
To import it at the app.
Do you have to make the file?
Look and see what he did in there. We can check it out when we get back from break.
Um, I mean, we're not really gonna use that, but it still should.
Is it working for you?
No.
I will be back. I'm gonna grab some food.
Yeah, I'm just gonna take that out for now. If you comment it out, it should go back to working. Um, there's got to be a obvious step for getting process env to work that I don't know about. So I just hard coded my URL and commented this out, and that got it fixed. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. I just did that for now.
Sorry, what was the
Uh,
attendance?
library.
And you said 725? Sorry,
Yes.
I'm rushing around everybody today.
You're good. 725. I did cause some problems with this example in my make API call. I used process.env. For some reason, that's not working out of the gate. So instead of spending some time on that, I just went ahead and commented that out instead and just hard coded my URL here. I thinking that there's probably something I got to do to get access to that that process.env. But for now, I would just comment that out and leave this URL in. That should resolve any front end errors that you may be having. Okay, so we've got our homepage showing up. We've got all of our books listed out. I think for the next thing, it makes sense is to be able to keep track of checking out a book and then also keeping track of what user is having what book, right? So I think that we want to set up a new table called users. And instead of doing user authentication, which a library would normally be doing, instead what we'll do is we'll set up maybe just a little drop down that lets you pick the different users in the database. But we do have to set up our model to do that. So before we dive in, does anyone have questions or need any help? Okay. So we will start over in db.js. I'm going to create my user.js. I'm going to go borrow my book model as a starting point. So I'm going to say user model. I'm going to say user model. And then in here, I'm going to just change it to their name. And that should be enough to get us started. I will go over to my db.js and pull in my const user by grabbing my user model and making sure that user model auto imports. Doesn't want to do that for me because it's being a little pain in my butt. So we'll do it manually. And instead of doing a seed file, which is what we did up here, instead, I'm just going to do it manually. I'm going to say const existing users equals await user.findAll. And I will say if the existing users dot length equals 0, then await a user.create with the name of Max, await a user.create with the name go ahead and save that. It is erroring out at me. Missing column. ID, name, created at, updated at, from books. Oh, you know what I probably forgot in here? May help if I renamed my model to say user in there. Okay. That should fix it. If I go over to my beekeeper, I can pop open my users table, and now I've got 3 users in there that I can work with. So user model, create the new file, update everywhere it says book with the word user. We're just keeping track of one column here. We obviously could add in something like password or address or, you know, allowed ratings of books they could check out or stuff like that. And then in my db.js, instead of going through the work of setting up a separate .json file, I did pull in my user model. And then I just hard coded some users to get created in here just so that we've got some data to work with. And then finally, we need to export our user right in the bottom of that model so that we can work with it outside of this file. If all of that makes sense, we now need to head over to our index.js. We will do a server.get for our users, which will be an async rec-reser that will res.send our users by awaiting a user.find all. That will give our front end access to the data, which means over in our homepage, we can set up a new variable called users and set users, which is going to come from a use state. We will update our if statement to say if there aren't books or there aren't users to catch our loading process. And then inside my make API call, I'm going to try and use our new function here. So I'm going to say const users equals my make API call to users. It's going to be a get, and it won't have any data in the body because it is a get request. So if I just console log out my users here, let's see what blows up. Promise. So I need to make an await here. Nothing. Backend's running. Oh, I am making infinite API calls. Let's not be doing that now. What did I break? Make API call. No. Does it really not like? Um, URL path. What in? I've got my use effect wrapped. I know that it's this call that's causing the problem. But even in my make API call, if I just console log this out, all right, something's seriously wrong here. We're gonna stop the server and restart it. Normally you get that when you forget the empty array parameters. Come on. Is it even console logging when I? All right, I've majorly screwed something up here. Oh, it's looping the call to books when I put this in. Books set books, users set users. If there's not books or users, return loading. Does it really not? I'm so confused by that. Let's try it this way. What in God's name did I do to anger? Make API call, make API call. It's not even. Oh. I named the function here make API call, and it was recursively calling this make API call instead of calling this called make API call. Whoopsies. Like that made absolutely no sense. Okay, sorry about that. What we need to do is rename this. Let's call this get data instead, and then get data down here. Then make API call is there, and all of this should be fine. And the only problem is in home, line 21. We can take this out. Okay, that's what I expected to happen. Sorry. So rename your function here to like get data, and that way we can reuse our make API call right here. So I'm going to get out the users, and then I've got the array of users right here. Okay, now I've got all of that, I can set my users to my users data that I'm getting right here. And finally, underneath my home, I can do a select dropdown, which is going to be generated by using a users.map that gets me access to each individual user. That will return an option with a key of the option.id, a value also using the option ID, and then the user.id, I mean. And the users.name right here. And the last thing I'll do is throw in an empty option so that if no user is selected, that dropdown will show up. So now if we come over here, we get an empty dropdown, but we can pick any of the 3 users in our database and use that as the signed in information. Cannot believe that it took me 10 minutes to debug that. Sorry. Little bit of a rabbit hole, but shows you the importance of naming your variables. What good names. Okay, so we threw our users in here. We set the users in state. We get access to the users here, and maybe we'll make this a controlled import. So we'll say selected user and set selected user will also be tied to use state. And then we'll start that out as an empty string. And then down here, we can say the value of this will be the selected user. And on select, maybe it's still an on change. I can never remember. Grab the event and set the selected user to the event target value. And our dropdown still works. Okay. That was a lot of work. Pausing there. We added in our make API call. We added in our users and our selected users. And then we show that data in a select where we are having a controlled input. We're saving that data in state. And then we're generating the options in the database based off of the users that we loaded in from that initial API call. Any questions about that? Anyone need one more minute?
I'm getting a failed touch again.
Okay. Share screen.
I honestly don't know where it would be.
Well, it took me 10 minutes to find mine, so hopefully I can find yours sooner. Let me request remote. That looks fine. Home.js. That looks fine. Users. Oh, app crashed. It doesn't want to import the user because the user needs to be exported down here. Okay. Give that a try, see if that fixes it.
Oh, pretty cool.
And if you pop open that drop down, you're good to go.
Sweet. Great.
Anyone else need help?
I got a question
Yeah.
about the.
Yeah.
I don't know if I missed it, but why did you do a drop down instead of just like having the user input their name?
Because I want to keep track of the users in the database.
Okay.
Right. So I don't want to just say, oh, this book is checked out by whatever string gets typed in. I want to be able to keep track of user ID 2 has book 3 and 5 out, kind of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question. Any other questions? Okay. So we need to now make it so that the user can check out a book, right? So I'm going to go over to my db.js and I'm going to make my final new file of the night. I'm going to call it checkedout.js, something that students who are no longer attending classes maybe. Excuse me. None of you guys. I'm going to go borrow my book model again. But I will call it checked out, and checked out model. Should be model as well. And then in here, I need to keep track of 2 different IDs. I need to keep track of the book ID that gets checked out, which will be an integer. And I also need to keep track of the user ID that's checking out the book, which will be an integer as well.
Oops.
From here, what I'm able to do is go into db.js and say that there are inside after our sync happens, we will say that a user has many checked out. Oh, we need to import that first. Const checked out equals checked out model db. Make sure that auto imported. It did. So we pull in the database. Then we say the user has many checked out where the foreign key is based off of the user ID field. Then we can also say that checked out belongs to the book with a foreign key of book ID. From there, we can make sure that checked out is exported. I don't know if we'll need that. And we can go into our index.js and say, hey, we're going to post to checked out, which is going to be async rec res. And it is going to await a checked out dot create, where it is going to take the data from the rec.body, and then it is going to res.send something back. So all we have done so far is in our beekeeper updated the model to have the book ID and the user ID. We have told the database, and we have to test this. I don't know if this is going to work quite yet, but we're telling the database what the relations are in that table. Then we created an endpoint right here to create a new checked out item. So in order to make that work, we are going to add a link here. So we'll make it a span tag. We'll throw some style on it of text decoration, underline, and color of blue. And we'll say check out item. And we will add a on click to check out item and include the book ID as part of that item that we are checking out. Then we need to make that checkout item function. I'm going to come up here and say const checkout item is going to get the book ID, and it is going to make an API call to checked out. It will be a post because we got to line up with the post here. And what we're going to do is send in the book ID and the user ID from the selected user. I promise I will pause after this. And this is going to go horribly wrong. So I'm going to see what breaks before I send you down the rabbit hole. I'm going to click checkout item. Doesn't look like anything happened. Didn't crash in the database. Oh, and it actually saved that data in. So if you got everything working, what should happen is, and we will add in like an alert here that says you've checked this out. Okay, so if everything works, you should be able to click on checkout item. You'll get a little alert. And then if you go into Beekeeper, you will see based off of what user you have selected and what book you clicked on the checkout, you'll be able to see that that book was checked out. pause there, give you guys a minute because that was kind of fast. If you have any steps about the process. Anyone need help? Another minute? Need an explanation of a section?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Line 30 on your home JS. I know
Mm,
this is to help like the loading screen if there was no books or users. Does the double straight lines mean or?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Some reason it's my server's running on 3002.
Yes, so is mine.
Mine should be on 3001. Hold up 1 second. All right, and now I'm getting a failed to fetch for some reason.
Okay. Share your screen.
On the front end, it looks like.
App crashed on the back end. Scroll up a
Oh.
little. Checked out is not defined, so you probably need an import up at the top in your server.js. Nope, you have your import. Oh, that was just an old error.
I just put it there.
Okay. Yes, Austin, the only change should be showing in the database. All that looks good. Check your beekeeper. And refresh. Good to go. Anyone else need a minute? Or help? Okay, this is where the magic actually happens. Let me clean some of this up. I'm gonna go to my checked out books. I'm gonna say const checked checked out books, and set checked out books is gonna come from a U state. And say if there aren't checked out books, return a p tag that says loading. Then we are going to do our use effect. And I'm not going to call this make API call, make that mistake again. We'll say get data. Async. Get data. That is going to get us our... I don't know what that's going to get us yet, so I'm just going to call it data. And we're going to await our make API call, which is getting imported. We're going to go to checked out books. And you know what? I changed my mind. We'll make it a template literal. Checked out books. And we need to know what user is selected. Yeah. Did not think that one through. Okay, let's think that through. Use state is not defined. I kind of want to move this up into the outlet so that this is available on like into the layout. So that's available on every page. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, a little bit of a refactor here. Good to see a refactor in progress though. We're going to go to home. We're going to steal the users. And I'm going to go up into my layout.js. And I'm going to throw my users in here. I'm going to borrow my use effect to get data. I'm going to borrow my users all the way down to here. I'm going to delete that out of here. I'm going to get access to... Oh, I need my selected user as well. I'm going to get access to... Take my entire select and move that up into my layout right underneath the nav bar. And I'm going to get access to my selected user from a prop that I'm going to pass down in my outlet here. Users is not defined at line 25. 25. This I'm going to take out. And I will say if there are not users, return p tag loading. Okay, I think that actually just worked. So the refactor, I realized that that was quick, but we basically went to home and we added in selected user here. We have to get that as a prop here because the layout is going to send in. Why are you mad at me about that? I'm just mad about it. What's going to happen is when we go to the outlet of the home page or of whatever page we are on, it's going to grab the selected user as a prop. So what we ended up doing is stripping out all of the user stuff from the home page. So the only thing in state now is the books. The only thing happening in the use effect is getting all of that book data. The checked out item stays largely the same, but that selected user, instead of it coming from the state, it's now coming from a prop all the way up at the top here. Then we removed the map of the select to generate out all of the options. We moved that all into layout. So make sure you got all of your imports up here at the top because some of them won't copy and paste over. Then I created two things in layout for the user and the selected user. I still do my get data, but it's a stripped down version of it because all I'm doing is getting the users out from it. Then I add in my if statement, say if there aren't the users loaded in, show it as loading. And I take my select from the previous page and load it in here. The only additional thing that I have done other than move code here is say, hey, take that selected user, which is in state all the way up in the layout, and send it down into the outlet. Well, the outlet is the page that is getting rendered. So we take the data from state here and send it into a prop called selected user. Selected user, we then get access to it as the prop up here in home. So when we check out an item, we can still know what user was selected all the way up in the layout itself. At least one of you's got to have a question on that. The end result should be you will have the errors on checked out books will be there, but you should have a drop down that when you click to a different page stays the same and still has the names in it. Okay, let's finish this sucker off. So in checked out books, we are going to get access now to the selected user. We can pass that information in as a route parameter as the selected user. It's going to be a get request, and then we got to go build that. So we're going to say server get checked out books, go grab the user ID, async rec res, and we're going to do that by res.sending back the books by awaiting going to the checked out books and finding all where the user ID lines up with the rec.params.user ID. And we also are going to include the book model. Get data, console log, data. Go back to our crashed. Invalid syntax for type undefined. Okay, try that again. Pick a name. Go to checked out books. Undefined. Selected user. Selected user. Selected user. Selected user. Set selected user. Make sure the API call only happens if there's a selected user. Users failed fetch because that crashed again. Try that again. Refresh. grab a user, go to checked out books, undefined, no crash. Data, checked out books, user ID, console log, rec params, user ID. Make this happen whenever a selected user change happens. Well, crap. Oh, can't use props. All right, let me try and recover this. Back in layout, I have to use context instead, where I'm gonna send in the selected user. Then in checked out books, instead of getting selected user, I'm going to say the selected user comes in from use outlet context. That's what I wanted. Okay, sorry. Let's backtrack this a little bit. Any questions, first of all, about pulling the user's dropdown up to the layout level? Let's break this down as an engineer. So way overwhelming to try and do this all at once, right? So at the layout level, we stole the user's dropdown, including getting all that API data out of home. We brought it up into layout.js. Does anyone have issues with getting the dropdown showing on every page? Or have all three of you just, or all four of you just been like, I'm going to go along for the ride, which is totally fine. I'm not judging.
I was already a little behind, so I'm kind of. I'm here for the ride.
Okay.
What's the expected output?
That you can see your dropdown on any page that you click to.
I did have, all right, well now it's giving me 1 second. I was able to do it a few seconds ago, I think, because when I went to go into checked out books, it crashed. So the fetch error. Let me see. Let's restart the back end. Let's see if that helps. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it gives me the fetch error on checked out books, but yes, I can go to the
Okay.
I can go between the main two.
So the second step is in layout. Outlet does not like getting props other than a prop called context. And so context works like a prop, but is a way that we can pass data into the outlet of a component. That's new for me. I've never actually had to do that before. So what you do is you add in context and then you give it access to the selected user.
What's the reasoning for it being in brackets versus just the
so that you can send in multiple values if you needed to. Then you get access to that selected user by using the outlet context up here.
check out books?
Yep. Then once you get access to it from the outlet context, you can make your GET request to include the selected user. Update home to. If you have made it all the way through there, what you can do is now that you get access to the data, which includes the books, let's call that checked out books. We're going to say set checked out books to the data dot checked out books. And what we can do is then come down here and say UL is going to go to the checked out books and is going to map to get each checked out book, which is going to return a list item that has the checked out book dot name. The key using the checked out book dot ID. Data checked out books. Checked out books. Checked out books. Map over them, get each individual checked out book. Oh, you know what? Is it just dot title? There we go. So the end result, which I will give you guys the full 15 minutes to get to if you so choose, or to ask questions about any part of it, is that you can go to the home page, you can have a user selected, you can check out an item, and you can go to your checked out books list and see that that item has been checked out. I will say that it is way more important to understand like the flow of the code than to get your code actually working. So if you want to kind of just go through the live share and see if you have any questions or any section of the flow, that is probably a better use of the last 15 minutes of the evening. Yes, Austin.
I just have a quick thing. It works for Max and Joe, but not for Terry. Which I don't know what that would be. I don't know if it's
Share
just
your
me.
screen. And yes, I will explain select user. Sorry, I'm just seeing that
I think
in
I have
chat.
the same issue.
Austin, let me just go through the never mind.
Oh,
No,
I
you're
can-
good.
Okay, sorry.
So let me request remote. So Terry is selected. We check out an item, says we checked it out. No, nothing checked out. We refresh and go to Terry. Okay, so let's look at it is probably because I modified. Yep. I
Oh, okay.
modified home. I did this very sneakily because I was wrong. We can't use props here. So instead we get it from use outlet context. which comes from React Router DOM. So now if Terry checks out something, goes to checked out,
There we
you're
go.
good to go. Nice work. Okay, so the flow that we do here is all the way up in layout. We keep track of the selected user in the state right here. However, because outlet doesn't like taking props, what we do is we take selected user and we give it access to selected user in something called context. Then whenever we want to get the selected user out of any component that shows up in the outlet, instead of accessing it in a prop that we would do up here, we get access to the selected user using that outlet context. So basically whatever is coming out of here lines up with whatever is in right here. What that allows us to do is take selected user, get access to it in something like checked out books, to use that data to get their ID to pass it into the user ID over here. Now what's happening is we're going to the checked out table, but we're doing a cool thing. We're doing a relational query to include the book data. So we're actually doing a table join there in SQL to pull that data in. Then when we get that data, what it looks like is not only do we get the checked out books, which has the book ID and the user ID, but we also get the book itself, which includes all of the data about that book, which is also kind of cool that you could go to a different user and that same user could check out that book and it would also show up for them. And then you can change it here and get what they have checked out as well. So I will do search for tomorrow because I've already completely fried your brains. But any questions on this before we call it for the night? Okay.